The company behind Candy Crush is having a rough time. Activision Blizzard makes some of the world's top video games like Overwatch, World of Warcraft, and Call of Duty. Now some employees are complaining of mistreatment and calling for changes.
Frat boy culture. That is how Activision Blizzard is now being described here in this new lawsuit filed by the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing.
You know, I just feel like when the news of the lawsuit broke, I just kind of relived all of that at once. Like, I feel like it just kind of like, I just got so angry, like, wow, I lived through all of this, and here are the leaders at my company that I'm working for now saying that this doesn't happen here, because I know it does, you know?
First reason, obviously, is the recent allegations. That was really the straw that broke the camel's back. That is the tipping point. To find out, after all that we've been through with World of Warcraft since probably the beginning of DFA,
design philosophy
that on top of that, this environment has existed within Blizzard to the point now where they're staging a walkout.
Everybody deserves their day in court.
And updating myself
Everybody
on the staff
should have the presumption of innocence.
Awful, reprehensible response
I'm not
to a hard situation.
Final Fantasy XIV.
I'd say they're fucking guilty.
On the activism train, you want to be a part of the action, and you know what, that's fine. Like, these people that are working there that were harassed, you know, like, they deserve your support. That's fine, do that. But like, the game sucked anyway, I hate people who say that, yeah, the game did suck anyway, but it sucked for years.
In November of 2004, Blizzard Entertainment released the massively multiplayer online role-playing game World of Warcraft, based on the story and content of their previous Warcraft titles. The MMORPG was an instant critical and commercial success, and by March of 2005 had reached 1.5 million subscribers globally. At its peak, WoW reached 12 million subscribers, and Blizzard would go on to release 7 more expansions for World of Warcraft, generating billions in revenue through subscriptions, game purchases, merchandise, and ticket sales to their convention BlizzCon. Yet Blizzard would also go through name changes, shocking controversy after shocking controversy, a significant loss in player base, numerous developer exits, and finally fall to one of the major tech titans, Microsoft, to the tune of $68.7 billion USD. World of Warcraft, Blizzard's longest-running game and once one of the most successful games in the world, faces a dubious, barren future. And so does Blizzard. So, how did we get here? How did it come to this?
How did it come to this?
What was World of Warcraft when it began, and what is it now? Originally released in 2004, World of Warcraft was an open-world role-playing game which allowed the player to pick and customize an avatar, selecting from one of 8 playable races and 9 unique classes. Players could gain experience and equipment through quests,
Will you help me find my dog?
No.
dungeons,
2.33, repeating, of course, percentage of survival.
Oh, it's a lot better than we usually do.
Alright, chums up.
Ready, guys?
Let's do this. Leroy!
Oh my god, he just ran in.
or player versus player scenarios. WoW was built upon the rich and already established lore of the war-torn Azeroth, the fantasy world in which the series largely takes place, and encouraged players to explore this lore in a myriad number of ways. This included groups, guilds, or otherwise. Various communities quickly sprung up throughout WoW, as well as legions of dedicated players. I myself was one of them. Before the release of World of Warcraft, Blizzard had already established themselves and their games within the PC gaming community. In 1994, the first Warcraft title, Warcraft: Orcs and Humans, was released. This was followed shortly by Warcraft 2: Tides of Darkness, Warcraft 3: Reign of Chaos, and Warcraft 3: The Frozen Throne in 1995, 2002, and 2003, respectively. Each expanded on the Warcraft lore and allowed players to engage with real-time strategy and layer multiplayer components. Warcraft characters, such as the shamanistic orc Thrall, Jaina Proudmoore the powerful mage, or Illidan Stormrage the former night elf / tortured bad boy,
You are not prepared.
were memorable, uniquely designed, and part of a sprawling fantasy world filled with dangers and discovery. Blizzard worked to incorporate these already beloved characters into a fully explorable, fleshed-out world for the player and their friends to feel part of, and to create their own stories within. By WoW's initial release, it was hotly anticipated, and for many years thereafter would dominate the MMORPG market. So what made it such a hit? What was so appealing and so addicting for players to spend hours and hours online in Azeroth? First, there were the mechanics. 9 classes were divided into healing, DPS, or tank roles, and sometimes a hybrid of each. Many players liked the flexibility their class provided in a variety of scenarios, or the flexibility to make any number of characters and try what best suited their playstyle. Becoming especially competent in certain classes, learning what worked best with each, or finding ways to optimize their class was a unique and intriguing challenge. WoW offered players a variety of ways for their character to gain experience and level up, as well as to acquire unique armor and abilities. A player could do quests, explore a variety of locations in-game, as well as attempt a number of interesting, challenging dungeons, which tested player ability and often rewarded them for their successes. There was also player versus player combat, which demanded quick thinking and reaction, since players were fighting against other people, not a computer. WoW's then rare usage of the third-person camera was immersive, and made the player feel as if they truly inhabited the body of their avatar. Combat became that much more intense, and exploration of expansive in-game landscapes made players true explorers, pathfinders in a dangerous and exhilarating world. Communities were quick to establish. Customs, culture, and slang unique to WoW developed rapidly, and it became especially apparent when a new player, a noob, was just that, as they had not yet acquired the knowledge of locals.
Bunch of noobs here, I can see them.
Famed guilds rose, player loyalty to their faction, the Alliance or the Horde, was a defining feature of many, and community events, such as role-playing events, became common, while unexpected moments, such as the Corrupted Blood incident, united players and became immortalized in their collective consciousness. Some players would rise to such heights in the community, whether famous or infamous, that WoW itself would later pay homage to these players in-game. I myself poured hours and hours into WoW. WoW was very popular with teens, tweens, and young adults in their early 20s, and I was no exception. As a tween and later teen, I spent countless hours roaming Azeroth, making friends, getting scammed, and role-playing on my shape-shifting druid. I would stalk through woods as a primal hunter, roam the plains as a nigh untouchable beast of speed, challenge any unsuspecting prey to the might of my bare paws, or swim around for a while as whatever this is. No matter how you played WoW, be it well or very bad in my case, you could always count on finding a community of players like you, and feeling excited to meet them in your virtual world on weekends or after school, knowing that most likely they too were sitting in their computer room, on a computer which likely looked like this. By 2007, WoW was thriving, and was only about to become more popular with the release of the first expansion, the Burning Crusade, that same year.
You are not prepared.
The expansion offered 2 new playable races, new dungeons, a higher level cap, the addition of flying mounts, and an all-new continent to explore. The expansion was met with critical acclaim, and 3.5 million copies were sold within its first month alone. While the player reception was largely positive, part of the appeal of the Burning Crusade was the mythic status it cultivated in the years to come. Players were able to enter the new realm, Outland, together, through a portal in-game upon the release of the expansion. There were so many players gathered together, ready to experience the expansion as one, that servers collapsed left and right, and that only added to the story and to the myth. Players were, together, eager to explore, to learn new modes of PvP with the introduction of arenas, to learn new raid techniques to overcome Outland's biggest baddies, to be the first on their server to reach level 70, and to earn their first flying mount. These were things which had rarely been seen before, which genuinely captivated players with their newness and originality, and Blizzard had set a very high standard. For players that had been playing since the initial release of WoW, or who joined with the Burning Crusade, it left a substantial impression in their memories. I remember when I first stepped through the portal on a mount which had been essentially loaned to me, and which I never repaid. The thrill was momentous, and the exhilaration absolutely genuine. Side note, guess who? If you're out there, know that I am deeply sorry I never paid you back. World of Warcraft had proved to be not just successful, but incredibly lucrative, bringing in over $1 billion in subscriptions annually. Yet soon, Blizzard would start to look a little different. Blizzard had been founded in 1991 by Michael Morhaime, Frank Pierce, and Alan Adam. In 1998, Blizzard had been acquired by the French media conglomerate Vivendi. By the mid-2000s, Vivendi's game division had been facing increasing setbacks. Bobby Kotick, the then CEO of the nearly bankrupt video game publisher Activision, known for titles such as Call of Duty, was looking to incorporate MMOs into the brand, noting their profitability. World of Warcraft in particular had caught his attention, and he began discussion with Vivendi, as well as with Michael Morhaime. Both WoW's substantial revenue, as well as Blizzard's recent, albeit tenuous, corporate partnerships within the Chinese game market, were noted points. The CEO of Vivendi, Jean-Bernard Lévy, Bobby Kotick, and Michael Morhaime reached an agreement, and in 2008, Activision merged with Vivendi Games, dissolving the division entirely apart from Blizzard. The new company was called Activision Blizzard. For several years, the newly named Activision Blizzard would continue to not just find success, but reach the peak of their subscription base. Wrath of the Lich King, their second expansion, would release in 2008. Once more, Blizzard promised an expansive new area, Northrend, to discover, and brought out another popular baddie from their established lore, Arthas Menethil, famed Lich and Patricidal Popsicle. A new class was released, the Death Knight, as well as additional endgame content, new professions, faction rewards, a whole host of new types of quests, and much more. Blizzard had learned from their previous expansion release how to manage the titanic increase in players, and entrance to Northrend was much more stable than Outland had been, though somewhat less memorable. Like the Burning Crusade, Wrath was incredibly well received, praised for its world design, mechanics, storytelling, and more. I personally can recall a favorite quest, saving a bunch of baby murlocs while dressed to the nines. Yet while Wrath would draw in hundreds of thousands more to WoW, there was now a notable divide between those who had been playing since 2004, the vanilla version, and those who had joined more recently and had never experienced the game in its infancy. This divide was about to become much more pronounced by 2010. 2010 saw Activision Blizzard's peak subscription hit 12 million, but within the year and by the end of 2011 dropped significantly. 2010 saw the release of the third expansion, Cataclysm. The baddie this time was the lesser-known dragon of Warcraft lore, Deathwing, who has a bunch of creepy guys whispering into his dragon ears or something. Cataclysm, somewhat ironically named, erupted in division between players, though it was critically well received and achieved record-breaking sales. One of the most obvious and to some egregious changes was that the two major continents, which had remained largely unchanged throughout expansions, had been entirely redone. Until then, players had traveled far to explore expansion-based content, but could return to the major cities and loved continents they knew so well at any time. Now, entire landscapes had been remodeled, torn asunder by Deathwing/Activision Blizzard's power. Popular cities such as Orgrimmar and Stormwind were drastically different, and the virtual homes that so many players had known had become virtually unrecognizable. It was also becoming clear to long-term players that Activision Blizzard was working hard to streamline elements of the game. Shortly before the release of Cataclysm, a patch had been worked into the game which introduced the Dungeon Finder mechanic. Players could select their desired role and a 5-man dungeon, and be entered into the dungeon with players from any server. This made the process of finding dungeon groups significantly faster, as prior to that people, needed to talk in order to find a group. The Dungeon Finder system quickly became the norm, as did speedy runs with next to no talking, which seemed rather uncharacteristic of a game that had, prior to, encouraged social group-based behavior. Questing too had become considerably more streamlined per area, and many old and favorite quests, such as class-related personal quests, had been removed from the game. Even flying mounts, which had until recently only been allowed in expansion zones, were brought into Kalimdor and the Eastern Kingdoms. For some, this This removed their level of immersion and introduced instead a focus on mechanic efficiency, rather than, well, enjoyment and the feeling of earning something. There were other dungeon mechanics or new class restrictions which irritated a number of veteran players as well. Yet it could also be argued that new players were given an accessible entryway into WoW through the changes Cataclysm brought to Azeroth. They didn't notice the world had changed, or were bothered by these new mechanics because they had not known what WoW was prior to them. Deathwing was simply a large dragon, and WoW was a popular MMO which was both following and pioneering industry MMO trends at the time. For many, however, there were simply too many red flags, and veteran players especially began to quit in droves. Sadly, I too would depart for some time from WoW, as both the world and player base seemed increasingly hostile. It seemed, especially for long-term players, that by becoming Activision Blizzard, the old Blizzard, as it was called, was either dying or already dead. Following Cataclysm, Activision Blizzard would release 5 additional expansions. There is frankly too much to talk about, and we would be here for an absolute eternity if I did discuss each in depth. Some general points, however, are as follows. Generally, these additions were received well enough by critics, and the sales were generally good enough. Each expansion would bring in generally well-regarded mechanics or additions, although some expansions were generally poorly received by players, particularly Warlords of Draenor in 2014 and Battle for Azeroth in 2018. Legion, released in 2016, was perhaps one of the most popular expansions, and contributed to a number of former players checking back in with the game. Yet WoW was so changed, so mechanical and coldly streamlined for so many, that it was difficult to maintain a genuine attachment. Long-term players felt that the developers were never listening to mechanics or elements they disliked about each expansion, and many players would agree that the writing had become flat, convoluted, and often incomprehensible for those unfamiliar with Warcraft lore. Activision Blizzard's subscription fell over the years, slowly but significantly. It was clear that a sizable portion of veteran players had left, and Activision Blizzard needed a way to encourage their return. Nostalgia is something which the entertainment market is quick to capitalize on, as evidenced by remakes or sequels in movies. Activision Blizzard was well aware that players were, for a long time now, nostalgic for their golden days of World of Warcraft. Complaints about the current state of WoW were ever present on Reddit, WoW forums, or even in-game. Activision Blizzard had somewhat staunchly refused to enable that vision for some time, with former President J. Allen Bragg even famously stating, "You think you do, but you don't," at a 2013 BlizzCon Q&A in response to fans' request to access vanilla servers. Yet WoW private servers, many of which hosted pre-Cataclysm realms, were thriving, feeding off of this nostalgia. This served as further incentive for Activision Blizzard to both take legal action against those servers and to reclaim their lost earnings. In 2019, Activision Blizzard released the much-anticipated WoW Classic, a remastered, only slightly modified version of the vanilla version of WoW. Players did not need to purchase the game, only a subscription, and purchase subscriptions they did. Initial release saw massive queues, incredible numbers of players, and a thriving, albeit chaotic, first couple of weeks. While things would eventually level out, especially as some players realized they were playing a nearly 16-year-old game, Classic maintained generally stable server populations, and players could enjoy aspects of the game they had sorely missed. Especially noteworthy being the social aspects of WoW Classic, its visual elements of unchanged cities and landscapes, and some of players' favorite classic battleground, questing, or dungeon content. Many players had come from private servers. Others had found a happy solution to disliking retail WoW while still desiring to play, and some had returned after many years of absence, brimming with nostalgia. I was certainly one of them. I returned with hesitant, excited optimism. This time I was much older, ready to play the game a bit more properly, and though I maintained my general ineptitude as a player, the friends I made and the content I was able to experience again certainly made up for that. WoW Classic also worked in Activision Blizzard's favor because it boosted, however temporarily, their player base, and allowed those players the option to try WoW in its current retail form. Players could switch between the retail version of WoW, even being given an in-game mechanic to cycle between former expansions and sample their content, and then back into WoW Classic with great ease. Furthermore, Activision Blizzard would release their newest expansion, Shadowlands, in 2020, giving it greater visibility to a more active player base. For even a little while, World of Warcraft was, frankly, relevant again. Not as it had been in years past, but still notably, and certainly in a way which could turn a profit. This increased visibility, nostalgia-stroking festival of fun, would grow bigger until the re-release of the Burning Crusade in June of 2021. And then, shortly thereafter, and somewhat ironically, this visibility allowed players as well as the general public front row seats to the event. July 20th, 2021, the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing, responsible for enforcing state workplace discrimination laws, filed a gender discrimination lawsuit against Activision Blizzard. The lawsuit, which I have linked in the description, contains some truly vile material, and I would advise caution to any who might be upset by discussions of sexual abuse and harassment. The 29-page document alleges many instances of abuse, some of which go back over a decade. Many of Activision Blizzard management, including aforementioned You Think You Do, But You Don't, President J. Allen Brack, have had multiple internal complaints filed against them which HR routinely ignored. HR's actions evidently even discouraged employees from reporting harassment. Women reportedly received lower pay than their male coworkers, and they faced scrutiny in hiring based on their looks. Women of color faced particular discrimination. Promotions favoring men over women were commonplace, and women were terminated at a much higher rate than men. Harassment was constant, normalized, and even encouraged by those in positions of authority. This was exemplified by the senior creative director of WoW, Alex Afrasiabi, whose own BlizzCon 2013 hotel room was dubbed the Cosby Suite on account of his well-documented sexual harassment of female employees. Female employees were subjected to a frat boy culture of unwanted sexual advances, sexual assault, jokes, verbal abuses, and humiliation. There is a particularly devastating tragedy which the lawsuit outlines, but which I will not go into further out of respect for the victim. The information presented in the lawsuit was immediately available to the public, as well as the WoW player base, and caused substantial backlash and anger towards Activision Blizzard. The following day, July 21st, Activision Blizzard released a statement which denied the allegations, going so far as to claim that they were lies, inaccuracies, that they were disgraceful and even unprofessional. Things fell apart quickly after that. Former and current employees took to social media to stand in solidarity with the victims, as well as to confirm the accusations. Production at various studios began to halt, and by the 26th, employees were signing an open letter which condemned the official statement from leadership. Employees would later create a petition against Activision Blizzard which included 4 points. 1. End mandatory arbitration clauses in employee contracts, which are widely believed to protect companies and not employees. 2. Institute hiring practices that improve representation and equity for women, people of color, non-binary people, and other marginalized groups. 3. Publicly publish compensation data, promotion rates, and salary ranges for employees in the company. 4. Creation of diversity, equity, and inclusion task force from a third party to audit the HR department, executive staff, and the company reporting structure. This culminated in an employee walkout, which was highly publicized on social medias such as Twitter and Instagram. Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick responded quickly with an apologetic letter to employees, while the company simultaneously worked to hire Wilmer Hale, a law firm with alleged ties to union busting at Amazon. This was, understandably, not well received by employees. They staged another walkout in mid-November, demanding Kotick's removal, particularly in light of further revelations that he had ignored sexual misconduct. An open letter from employees received well over 1,000 signatures demanding his removal. Within the same time frame, J. Allen Brack stepped down from his role as president amid backlash, as did Senior VP of HR Jesse Meshach, WoW designer Jonathan LaCraft, Diablo 4 director Louis Barriga, and lead-level designer Jesse McCree. Yes, that McCree. Except he's called Cassidy now. Activision Blizzard was next sued by its own investors for misleading or withholding pertinent information about the DFEH lawsuit. Subsequent filings in the DFEH lawsuit accused Activision Blizzard of shredding documents, and the suit was removed to federal court, where the EEOC next sued Activision Blizzard for sexual harassment and discrimination. A settlement of $18 million was eventually reached, and in a bid to collect themselves, Activision Blizzard requested to stay in the California lawsuit, but was denied. As of now, Bobby Kotick still remains CEO, although he's expected to step down soon. For years, WoW's subscription count had been growing steadily lower. Shadowlands, the newest expansion, was underperforming and faced much of the same criticisms as had earlier expansions. When the news of the lawsuit broke, and players watched in real time as Activision Blizzard fell apart, its leadership undeniably playing the villain in the scenario, it was just another nail in the coffin. For several years already, WoW players had been slowly leaving the game for the greener pastures of Final Fantasy XIV, WoW's biggest competitor to date. Now, it was more like an exodus, as players left WoW in the thousands to fill Final Fantasy servers, generating lengthy queues and creating bunny girls and cat boys in unknowable numbers. Popular WoW streamers such as Preach Gaming or Quasi were quite public about quitting WoW altogether. In-game protests were held by players, heralding the same hashtag as Activision Blizzard employees and walkout supporters used on Twitter, ActiBlizzWalkout. Other players who still had active subscriptions made a point to simply boycott the game and encouraged others to do so. Of course, many players continued business as usual, as did many streamers. Some players claim it is a matter of principle that to play the game ensures the workers who built it will not be laid off. Whatever their belief may be, Activision Blizzard has allegedly lost 2 million players across their entire player base in the last 3 months, according to their recent quarter publishing. As of last year, they have lost a total of 5 million. I have discussed a lot, maybe too much, of the history of World of Warcraft and of Blizzard. For some, the allegations against Blizzard, against top developers and long-venerated heroes of the Blizzard community, may have come as a great shock. For many others, I think it really isn't a surprise. If anything, it was an inevitability. A culture of abuse and toxicity do not form in a vacuum. Foundations are laid, and from them a series of very bad things fester. Warcraft was always the most popular and well-known of Blizzard's work, as well as the cash cow. It has become famous for a number of reasons and infamous for just as many. Even from its earliest days, WoW was well known for having a number of abrasive players who weaponized hate speech, harassment, and abusive language. These acts were normalized through incessantly proselytizing that these were jokes, by playing it being the victim of censorship, and by redirecting ire onto anyone criticizing them. Those that played the critic were deemed too sensitive, and in the tamest instances were simply told to leave or to look the other way. Through this methodology, many players were freely able to espouse conspiracy theories, recruit young and impressionable players into ill-disguised hate movements, and subject especially vulnerable players, including children, to unwanted sexual advances and harassment. Blizzard has long been criticized for allowing the state of their world to grow as it did, for not taking harsh stands against inexcusable behavior, or punishing players to the full extent of their ability for such offenses. Moderating in-game chats and player experiences more closely was never something Blizzard was known for. Later in the timeline, Blizzard even began to rely on players to do unpaid moderation themselves, by either reporting players with an in-game mechanic or simply to work to curate safer, kinder spaces on their own. For their part, Blizzard never preached of a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, intolerance, or abusive language, nor enacted anything which might encourage players to practice their own zero-tolerance policy. In something we have come to see of Blizzard, they frequently overlook the problem and fail to protect those impacted. In many ways, the toxic culture of World of Warcraft reflected what was happening at Blizzard. Victims were subjected to similar shallow excuses, normalization of abuse, and failure of those with power to protect them. For many, the effects were long-lasting and deeply traumatic. The initial management of Blizzard, including the 3 founders, Michael Morhaime, Frank Pierce, and Alan Adam, set the tone by hiring mostly men and chronically overlooking their misbehavior. J. Allen Brack was hired as a producer for WoW in 2005, and despite what we now know has happened under his watch, would come to replace Morhaime as president in 2018. All 3 founders during their time at Blizzard would go on to marry women in much lower ranked positions at the company. These were consensual relationships, but the power imbalance was very apparent, and it set a precedent and a model which many male employees would weaponize over their female coworkers. Blizzard was also known to hire from its player base, including World of Warcraft players. Many of these employees would be put into positions of authority, such as Ian Hazakostas, current director of World of Warcraft. They would become something like rock stars or legends in their own right to new employees and long-term players, and their priorities, their worldviews, and their relationships with other people would reflect in the game and, subtly or no, influence its players. Those employees experiencing harassment or who knew of others experiencing it were subject to the threat of blacklists should they desire to take loud action, to stifling and discouragement from their own HR department, and to the propaganda within their own company. They were lucky to work there, to turn their passion into the dream job, and to work with such rockstar developers. Every abusive word, every low paycheck, and every minute of mandatory overtime were all worth it, because this was Blizzard. This was just how it was. For many years, Blizzard has, in essence, put a series of band-aids over a very large wound. Many point to the Activision acquisition of Blizzard as the onset of that wound, which certainly has credibility, but it can also be argued that the wound was just always there. Blizzard, like any company, seeks profit and success, and it always has. WoW itself was designed to cater to the long and established history of fantasy, of beloved mechanics like those found in Dungeons & Dragons, and of the powerful draw of escapism. Blizzard designed everything, and despite the fact that the company would be willingly sold to other companies several times over, Blizzard always seemed to be its own master. Blizzard appeared to many to be a monolithic bastion of creative control, until it apparently wasn't, and Activision had cannibalized it. But this is only a half-truth, because Blizzard has always decided. Blizzard decided to merge with Activision. Blizzard decided to release every subsequent expansion. Blizzard decided to overlook harassment and abuse, and Blizzard decided, amidst its own turbulence and trouble, to be acquired by Microsoft, the much larger, much richer, and much more powerful company. This was, for Blizzard, a solution. So this is where we are now. This is, in some ways, how we got here. What will happen next is anyone's guess, but perhaps this quote from Michael Morhaim's apathetic and somewhat tone-deaf open letter best encapsulates a note for us to go out on. I hear you, I believe you, and I am so sorry to have let you down.